I am Catherine Fisher, one of the co-authors of Piano Safari. I work at Ohio University. I teach piano pedagogy there. And I also maintain a studio of pre-college students.
And I'm Julie Haig, and I am in my studio in Connecticut where I teach a small number of students. And I'm the other co-author of the Piano Safari method.
So as we start a new school year, we thought it would be helpful to think about the best ways to structure lesson plans when using Piano Safari. If you have a question throughout the course of the webinar you'd like us to address at the end, please drop it in the Q&A because that's the easiest way for us to find it when we take questions. So this webinar is structured as a sandwich. For our top slice of bread, we have philosophy about stages of study. And then the filling to our sandwich is practical. We'll be taking a look at sample lesson plans at various levels. And finally, our bottom slice of bread will be some more philosophy about lesson planning in general. So Piano Safari has 3 method curricula. Our newest book, Piano Safari Friends, is designed for students ages 4 to 6, and it's intended to prepare them for Piano Safari Level 1. Our core Piano Safari method series is designed for students ages 6 to 10, the average age beginner. It has 3 levels of material. And we also have a method for older students, beginners, ages around 11 through adult. However, in this webinar, we are going to focus on the younger children.
Different ages require different approaches to lesson planning and assignments. As Benjamin Bloom describes in his wonderful book, Developing Talent in Young People, there are 3 basic stages that students move through. In the early stage, ages 4 through about 10, lessons should be filled with fun, encouragement, musical activities and games with a kind, patient, and caring teacher who develops a love for music in students. Stickers and treats are often motivating at this age. Students then move into the middle stage of study around ages 10 through 15, and at this age they desire to excel. This is a time for technical development and detailed work on pieces to develop skill. In the middle stage, it's all about developing skill. Recital performances are very motivating at this age. And then Bloom's final stage is the later stage, starting about ages 16 and above, and this is where students make the transition to playing music for the love of it, an intrinsic love for music. So we can keep this framework in mind when deciding how to work with a student in a lesson and how to plan our lessons. So Piano Safari covers basically the first 2 stages of study, early and middle stage, and that's what we'll focus on today.
During the early stage, for our youngest students who are studying in Piano Safari Friends and Piano Safari Level 1 and 2, our goal in the lesson is to appeal to how young children learn, through play. The lesson should be fun, interesting, and safe. We make lessons playful and fun by using props, like stuffed animals, games, and teaching aids, and also changing frequently between on and off the bench activities. We make lessons interesting by presenting music that has a variety of sounds. This is deeply embedded in the Piano Safari approach through the variety of pieces students learn. We have rote pieces, improvisation pieces, and follow the leader pieces, alongside the simpler and more traditional sounding reading pieces. In this way, students are exposed not only to traditional diatonic pieces, such as this reading piece, Weird Bird, in addition to a piece like Weird Bird, students can also play pieces that sound pentatonic, like the rote piece Hawk on the Mountain Peak. Students also play minor pieces, such as this Follow the Leader piece, Hide and Seek from Piano Safari Friends. may also learn other pieces such as improvisations with bluesy or modal sounds. We make lessons safe by being masters of presentation. If we are experts at presenting each piece and concept in a step-by-step way that's appropriate for each student, the student will experience success with each step, staving off frustration. Students develop confidence at the piano. I don't know how many times my young Piano Safari students have said to me, "I'm so good at this piece," or "I can do it." This is not innate overconfidence on the part of the student, but it comes from systematic training and a feeling of safety. As in, my teacher won't ask me to do something that's way too hard for me. I can trust my teacher.
As students transition to the middle stage of study, usually they are in Piano Safari level 3 or beyond, and the approach becomes more detailed, serious, and focused. In this middle stage of study, students derive great satisfaction from skill acquisition. We begin this process by presenting the student with their metronome at the beginning of Piano Safari level 3. I have one 10-year-old student who demonstrates this love of skill building. When I ask him to get out his metronome and play his scales, his response is, "Yes, can I play it at 208? I'm so good at this." He will then happily play his scales repeatedly at various tempos. It's his favorite part of the lesson. Not all students will have an oversized excitement about scale playing, but we have often seen the joy students receive from feeling their technical skills building. Goals, charts, and recital performances are all very motivating at this stage. This is one of the reasons that we provide so many charts and coloring mandalas in Technique Book 3 for students to chart their progress. I have several students in my studio who are currently making this transition into the middle stage of study and are in or have just graduated from Piano Safari level 3. I have seen the need to explain this transition to my students. When they were young, we moved through many pieces in a month. As students progress and their music becomes more difficult, we focus on fewer pieces over a longer period of time, working towards artistic and technical perfection. So as students enter this middle stage and we stay on each piece longer, we don't want the students to think that just because they aren't passing pieces as fast as they did before, that they are not doing well. To explain this, I had my mom, who's an artist, make me a series of 4 paintings. And I tried it out. I picked these up yesterday from her and tried them out with my Tuesday students, and they were a big hit. So I tell the students that painters who paint art, make their art in paint, in visual, something you can look at on the wall. Whereas we as musicians make our artistic pieces in sound. So our art is in sound and painter's art is visual. So this is the first version of the painting she did. And I asked the students, "What do you think this is?" And some of them said trees or flowers, or when I first saw it, I thought it was some stick figures, because that's how I would draw stick figures. I'm not an artist, visual artist. So then the next stage is for her to add color. So in the first stage here, in terms of music, it's like when you just start learning a difficult piece and you're just getting the outline of the piece, learning the basic notes and rhythms. Then as you continue to study the piece, you add more detail, and then you keep working on the piece and more detail is added. And then, oh, the piece is almost done. The painting is almost done, but there still can be more details added to make it a final finished product like this. So that's what we're doing as we work on a piece long term. We're gradually shaping it into a finished work of art, and our works of art are in sound and my mom's are in paint. So this is a great way to explain to students the transition to the middle stage of study when they're working on their pieces longer and more in detail.
Now that we understand some of the philosophy around stages of study, we will provide some practical advice for lesson planning, beginning with the earliest stages. Following is a sample first lesson plan from Piano Safari Friends, assuming a 30-minute lesson. I personally like to do longer lessons with students at this age, even 4 and 5-year-olds, but we understand that most people have 30 minutes and that's realistic. So the goal of the lesson is to help the student feel comfortable, competent, safe, and excited about piano lessons. A great initial activity is to put the music alphabet cards in order if the student knows letters. I begin by lining up the cards in order behind my book here. And just chant through the cards with the student. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, to check if they know their letters and can follow along, tracking from left to right with me. And then if they do know their letters and they are able to chant back the alphabet, we'll mix up the cards and have them put them back in order. This takes about 3 minutes or so. Next, we listen to the music alphabet song while marching around the room to the beat. This gets the student off the bench, and it also builds a sense of rhythm. So here's a bit of the audio track. So those audio tracks do come with the book in Piano Safari Friends, Repertoire Book 1, Repertoire Book 2. You can find that code in the front to download the audio. So after we have put our cards in order, we've marched around the room to the music alphabet song, I like to bring out my stuffed animals. So one of the main animal characters in Piano Safari Friends is Charlie Chipmunk, and Charlie also features in Repertoire Book 1. So to introduce Charlie, I like to have students play the game Find the Chipmunk. So I hide Charlie somewhere in the room and ask the students to find him as I play some of the audio tracks for their upcoming pieces, which are actually about Charlie. This will take about 1 to 2 minutes, so don't hide Charlie anywhere too difficult to find. After the students have found Charlie and met Charlie, the student and I play Wake Up Charlie, which is the first follow the leader piece in the book. Some of you may be familiar with this type of piece if you watched our webinar recently about Piano Safari Friends, but if not, the teacher models a short phrase and the student imitates immediately afterwards. This is different than a rote piece because the student does not need to actually memorize the patterns, but they simply observe and imitate in the moment. This piece will take about 5 minutes to cover with the student. Here's just a short video clip.
You go with your right hand. Oh my, good copying.
After playing the piece with the student, I bring out my drum, which always excites students because I have this huge African drum here, which is hard to show on the screen. But we learn the animal rhythm patterns by doing tap backs on the drum. So for instance, if I tap on the fall board, Charlie Chipmunk, then my student on the drum will imitate and say, Charlie Chipmunk. We have some other ones, Zachariah Zebra, Zachariah Zebra. So we take about 2 to 3 minutes going back and forth, tapping the animal rhythm patterns. Next, students always love this part. We decorate the groups of 2 black keys using the piano decorating kit. So a PDF of this comes with the book so you can print out the pieces, and we are still working on actually producing them, but there's been delays, so hopefully that will be in the near future. So here's my little zebra triangles, and I would give them to the student and show them how we place them on all of the groups of 2 black keys. So that's our focus for the next piece. So rather than decorating the entire piano, we'll just focus on the groups of 2 black keys, and then there's actually a piece for all of the groups. And after decorating, we learn a piece that uses these groups of 2 black keys called Climbing Up. This is a rote piece, so students are actually expected to memorize the patterns, but it's quite simple. Students play from the bottom of the piano, moving up to the top, And they use the same exact pattern on all the groups of 2. And at the end, I like to have them use Charlie to do the big glissando. So Charlie comes back down from the top of his tree to the bottom so that he can do it again. So building in some repetition with the piece. So in case you aren't familiar with this one, here's just a quick video of climbing up. Charlie, can you scamper down the tree? Yes. To conclude the lesson, we review the 2 pieces that were introduced, Wake Up Charlie, the Follow the Leader piece, and then Climbing Up. So I think this will take about 7 minutes just to run through them again. With that Follow the Leader piece, maybe we'll add the accompaniment and even add an element during the review. So this plan again is for a lesson length of 30 minutes. If you have a 45-minute lesson, you could spend an additional 1 to 2 minutes on each of the items above, or you could add additional activities such as the animal sounds improvisation, decorating the groups of 3 black keys with our zebra rectangles, and then learning that rope piece that goes with the groups of 3 black keys called breakfast time. And finally, a sample assignment for this lesson might be just to listen to the audio tracks at home. The parent can even put them on in the background while the child's playing. So the pieces to focus on listening wise at the beginning are the finger number song. We didn't show you that one today, but it's a great one. Then Wake Up Charlie and Climbing Up are the pieces the student actually played, so they should be listening to those. And then Breakfast Time and Music Alphabet Song are the upcoming pieces. So we want to prepare students' ears ahead by listening to pieces that will be coming up in future lessons. So in addition to the listening at home, they can play Climbing Up, that rope piece. There's a reminder video available from our website. They can play it several times a day, maybe coming back to the piano even at different moments. We also encourage just doodling and improvising at the piano rather than only playing what's on the assignment. Sometimes parents will ask us, is it okay if they play around or play other things? And absolutely, we would say yes. And finally, just practice saying the music alphabet, and if they have musical alphabet cards, practice putting them in order. So that's a very realistic first 30-minute lesson for a student who is probably 4 or 5 years old.
Next, we want to talk through a first lesson planned for students who are starting in Piano Safari Level 1, usually ages 6 through 9. Though some of these activities are geared a little bit towards the younger side, like age 7, but you can just adjust it based on the age of the student. So we would again have them put the music alphabet cards in order, especially if they're young, like 6 or 7-year-olds, just to see how they follow directions and make sure they know their alphabet. And because this is so easy, it's a very non-threatening way to begin the lesson. And it only takes about 1 minute. Next, we would decorate the piano, starting with the groups of 2 and 3 black keys. So here's, again, the zebra triangles go on the group of 2 black keys. The giraffe rectangles that Catherine mentioned go across the groups of 3 black keys. And then we have little letters that go on each of the white keys. So this helps us to see the attention span of our new student, if they're able to concentrate long enough to decorate the entire piano, and also as just a really fun introduction to the white key names. It takes about 8 minutes or so. Oops, I see it says 2 minutes there. It should say 8. Sorry about that typo. Next, they learn Alphabet Boogie because they just decorated the piano and we talked about the musical alphabet. And so this piece is based on the music alphabet A, B, C, D, E, F, G, moving all the way up the piano. student was 5 years old when he was playing this. This was before we created Piano Safari Friends. So he started right in level 1. And because he had trouble focusing, it was a big accomplishment for him actually to be able to play from the beginning to the bottom to the top of the piano without stopping to tell me a story in the middle. But gradually his attention increased so that he could play the whole piece. And he's still studying with Catherine and playing Beethoven sonatas at this point. He's much older now. The next thing we would do in our lesson is, again, to find the chipmunk that we've hit around the room, and then to learn a rote piece that goes with it called Charlie Chipmunk. So this is in our regular Piano Safari series, so we have a different chipmunk piece. And this they learn by rote, so we just show them a pattern, and then they would copy that, and then we would show them the next pattern. And then they would copy that, and we keep adding on until they can play the entire piece. So this usually doesn't take more than 5 minutes for them to learn the whole piece in the lesson. And here's a video of the finished product. Also, I wanted to mention that later on, this video is from a longer 18-minute video where I recorded an entire first lesson and then edited it down to video length. So it was a 45-minute lesson, but I condensed it just so you can see some of the activities that we do and how they flow in the lesson. And that's available on our YouTube channel, the Piano Safari YouTube channel. If you just search in first lesson, you'll be able to find it. Next, we would do playbacks on the drum with the animal rhythm cards. And so not only do we have Charlie Chipmunk and Zechariah Zebra as shown there, but we have other ones such as Herbie Hippo, so that's hippo is the rhythm, and several others also. So we want to equate the students orally with how these sound and then gradually start introducing the notation. And then after this, I'd introduce the finger numbers page on page 10. So we learn that our thumbs are 1 and all the finger numbers. And then we can talk about low and high on the piano and practice playing in the low region and in the high region. Each of these finger numbers and high and low only take about 2 minutes. Next, we have the march improvisation. So students can play on any black keys and it'll sound good with the accompaniment. And so first we would listen to it. I would play the accompaniment and the student and maybe their parent would march around the room to feel the rhythm. And then they would sit back down on the bench and play any black keys while I play the accompaniment again. And then after that, we would review Charlie Chipmunk with a variation. So the chipmunk would tell us where he wants us to play his song. So the student would close their eyes and Charlie would go play, oh, Charlie wants us to play Charlie Chipmunk song up high. So then we play Charlie Chipmunk. And we would play the whole song high. And then Charlie might choose low sounds. And then we would play it down low. In this way, we get repetition out of playing the song over and over. And we're reviewing the concept of low and high that we introduced before. And then we would also review the Alphabet Boogie song, and students can play it with all their right hand going all the way up the keyboard and also with just their left hand so that they develop both hands. And then talk about the assignment and say goodbye. So this is a good flow for a 45-minute very first lesson with Piano Safari Level 1. Now for the assignment, at home, they would practice Alphabet Boogie and Charlie Chipmunk, the 2 rote pieces that they learned. And there are reminder videos on our website that the parent can pull up if the student needs a little reminder about how the piece goes. And then again, we would encourage doodling at the piano and listening to the audio tracks that they've played and that are upcoming in the introductory unit of Repertoire Book 1.
Notice how both of these first lesson plans have a variety of on the bench and off the bench activities. Piano Safari uses a unit-based approach. This means that students work within a unit until all of the pieces and activities have been completed in that unit. The order of the assignment within the unit is left to the discretion of the teacher and based on the need of the individual student. We have found it helpful with young students to develop a standard lesson plan order and keep it the same for each lesson, as this helps the student feel secure because they know what will happen and in what order. This is similar to ballet class, for example, when the exercises are always in the same order, and yet there is variety within each exercise. For 30-minute lessons, we suggest fewer pieces and activities per lesson, so you have more time for depth. And you also may want to consider making a tutorial video for the student to learn a simple reading piece at home, or send a link for a reminder video to learn a part of a rote piece at home. This will save time in the lesson as the student will gain an initial understanding of the piece.
So moving from the very first piano lesson, we wanted to show you a sample lesson plan from the middle of level 1, unit 3. And so first you would greet the student for 1 minute, and then we often like to start with sight reading cards. Sometimes I'll have them at the end, but often at the beginning when their mind is fresh. And we spend a good 10 minutes on sight reading cards in each 45-minute lesson. So the steps that we do with these, in case you're new to Piano Safari, is first we have the student color the treble clef sign red for right hand and write in the landmark treble G, light blue for left hand with the landmark bass C, and then with their sames color, we have them find all the sames or unisons, which actually is a great way for young students to analyze a sight reading exercise or a piece, because it's often difficult for them to actually see whether the notes are staying the same or going up or down. So that's a crucial first step that we use at the beginning, and then later wean them off the marking. You can do the sight reading cards just in the lesson, which often I do that at first just to make sure they understand all the concepts and how to do one successfully at home. Once you feel that the student is confident and knows how to figure out a card and do it correctly, you can send a few cards home for them to practice, especially if they have a parent to help. And then one fun way to work on the sight reading cards in the lesson, if you haven't seen this before, is to get one of these sticky hands from the dollar store. And if you throw them at things, they stick to them. So I will put some of the sight reading cards on the floor. And then those are the fish. And then with the sticky hand is your fishing pole. You catch a card and then play that card at the piano and then go back and catch another card. So students would do this for the whole lesson if we left them. It's just a really fun exercise. So anything that you can do, creative things to add a playful, fun, engaging activities to the lesson will really, really help students at the beginning stage of study, because they learn through play. So after spending 10 minutes on sight reading cards, let's say that they already knew the reading piece, My Dog Fritz, from previous lessons. We might just play through that quickly for 2 minutes or a couple times, maybe even 1 minute. And we often like to do variations to keep the repetitions fun, such as playing it in different octaves, playing hands together in parallel motion, playing slow or fast, and along with the teacher accompaniment. So those are great ways to make repetitions interesting. But just quickly review My Dog Fritz, and then we might introduce a new piece like City Stroll. So again, we would use the same steps as with the sight reading card, marking the treble clef red for right hand, filling in the landmark note 5 on G, and then analyzing to find the sames and marking them with the sames color before the student plays it. And this one has a diatonic sound, so it just sounds like... But the jazzy accompaniment makes it a lot of fun to play this one. So after we spend a good 8 minutes introducing this reading piece to make sure students absolutely understand unisons and seconds and are playing with a good hand shape with a non-legato articulation, Then we might move on to an activity that's a little bit more fun, off the bench, working without so much brain power as they just used in learning a new reading piece, like the animal rhythm patterns. So doing clapbacks on the drum and then gradually introducing the notation for the rhythm pattern so that students can match the picture of the chipmunk with the chipmunk notation. And then next we might go back into some deep study of technique. So if they've already learned the Zechariah zebra technique, we might just play through this to check their hand shape and their bouncy arm for about 4 minutes, and then spend 8 minutes on the improvisation piece that goes with the Zechariah zebra technique. In Zebra on the Playground, the improvisation part is that students get to choose the letters that they'll play or the keys that they'll play based on the instructions on the left page there. And then they choose, we choose one finger, like right hand finger 2, and they play the entire piece just with that one finger using the notes that they've chosen along with the teacher accompaniment. So this is great fun. Students love this. After they finish with right hand finger 2, they can color in the right hand finger 2 on the hand picture, and then we do the whole thing again with a different finger. I actually had one student who wanted to do this the entire lesson because coloring in the fingers was so fun. I didn't let him do it the whole lesson. We need to move on to other things. Next, we might spend 5 minutes learning a portion of Dandelion Fluff. With this particular rote piece, I like to introduce it over the course of 2 weeks. So I would do the first page the first week and the second page the second week. Of course, they're not reading the notation, they're just learning by rote, but just to let those patterns sink in. This is a beautiful rote piece, so I'll just play a little bit of it. This is also a good one for the teacher to repeat the accompaniment while the student improvises on black keys, if you'd like to do an additional activity with that one. Then we have assignment and goodbye. So as you can see, there's a lot of variety in the lesson. We have some at the piano and off the bench activities, and then we have reading, we have rhythm, we have technique, improvisation, and rote pieces, all within the 45-minute lesson.
So quickly moving on to levels 2 and 3, we'll probably do another webinar on lesson planning for levels 2 and 3, but just briefly, these levels should also have a mixture of activities, although the length of time for each activity can be lengthened and should be lengthened. This will allow for more detailed work on repertoire and technique. So after our initial greeting, we like to spend minimum 5 minutes technique. In fact, sometimes I spend 10 minutes or more. I really like to teach technique, but especially if you're introducing a new technique, it will likely take longer than 5 minutes. If you're just checking in on the technique, maybe 5 minutes. After technique, we spend 15 minutes or so working on pieces that were previously assigned, both reading and rote. And one thing we suggest is to use page marking tabs, and this is for level 1 also, for different types of pieces. So pieces the students are working on, pieces they're reviewing from, even past months, and maybe a special color for a recital piece. So this way, if you actually mark the pieces in the book, the student can find them easily. Even if they lose their assignment book or forget where that is, they can always know what pieces they are supposed to be working on. And as a teacher, it's a benefit too, because when they bring their book in, I know right where to go in the book. So after we have worked on pieces that they've practiced, I might spend 10 minutes or so introducing new pieces, and also at least 8 minutes on the sight reading cards. Personally, sometimes I even do sight reading cards at the beginning. Like if a student comes in, I'll give them a choice. Would you like to start with technique or sight reading cards? So I'm giving them that element to choose, but I do want to be sure I cover technique and sight reading cards at every lesson, because that is building skill that they can then take to their repertoire. So you could do it at the end. I do it often at the beginning, as long as you do it the majority of weeks. And then finally, the assignment and goodbye. Definitely we need 45-minute lessons at levels 2 and 3.
So different teachers have different ways of managing their time. I tend to teach really fast. And so I'm working on slowing myself down and covering more things in depth. And other teachers pace themselves much slower. So the extremes are only focusing on one piece for the entire lesson, which can make the student very bored. They don't really like spending a whole lesson on one piece. Maybe if you're in grad school studying Chopin Ballade, that might work, but not for the little ones. And then the other extreme is many, many pieces in the lesson, but no actual teaching. You're just basically dragging the student through, playing as many things as possible. And in that case, we need to stop and ask ourselves, does the student really understand the underlying concepts? Am I actually really teaching? So we need to find a balance in the middle between these two extremes. So one way to do this is to use what I call the conscious pacing teaching strategy. And this is from my 152 teaching strategies, which are found at pianosafari.com under resources. So the conscious pacing teaching strategy is when you consciously plan which items of the lesson you're going to spend in-depth time on and which you're going to move through quickly. So for example, in the lesson plan I showed you earlier, we were just reviewing My Dog Fritz very quickly, but then spending in-depth time on learning the new reading piece, City Stroll. We were just playing through our Zechariah zebra technique to check it quickly, but then spending more time on each finger in the Zebra on the Playground improvisation piece. So when you move slowly and then quickly, and then slowly and then quickly, the result is that the student says, what? The lesson is over already? Because as humans, we go at different speeds and don't like things either to be super fast the whole time or super slow the whole time. Actually, on Sunday, the preacher who was giving the sermon used the conscious pacing teaching strategy. He would slow down his speech when he was making an important point, and then he would speed up. And it actually made the sermon seem much shorter than it was. Not that he was a bad preacher by any means. He was very good because he was using the conscious pacing teaching strategy. Another thing to think about is, along with the conscious pacing, is to take time to explain the concept to the best of our ability. Because time spent in laying the groundwork for a concept at the beginning will reap benefits in the future. So if in one lesson you spend a lot of time helping students understand what the interval of a second is and doing activities to lay that groundwork, then they'll know that, and you don't have to keep explaining it in future lessons. So it seems like you might be teaching slowly and it takes a long time to explain the concept, but it actually is the most efficient way because it saves time in subsequent lessons and helps the student have mastery over that concept. Next is to be a master of presentation. So to really think through the steps for presenting a new concept or piece. And this will help you be more efficient with the use of time. And then to think about the benefit of becoming an expert at teaching one method. Of course, Catherine and I are partial to teaching Piano Safari exclusively, and we both feel like we've become an expert at teaching every single piece in these books because we've presented it to so many students. So when I'm teaching the rote piece Herbie Hippo from level 1, I know all the possible pitfalls. I know exactly each step to teach the student in order to get them to do the cross-hand coordination involved, and I know what to do if they have trouble. So I am an expert at teaching Herbie Hippo at this point. So this is one benefit from only focusing on teaching one method so that you become an expert at this method. And then we need to ask a question for each individual student because not all students are the same. First, with this student, should I help them learn a reading piece and practice it in depth in the lesson over and over again? Or should I introduce the piece at the lesson and then have the student perfect it at home? So it just depends on the student's comfort level with the concepts and also their individual preference. Some students work best the first way. They want your help in learning the piece, and then they want to know how to practice it and go over and over it in depth in the lesson until they feel confident to then go home and keep playing what they know in their practice, so that the practice time becomes playing what you already know rather than figuring it out at home. And then other students are more independent and would much rather just figure it out at home. And you can allow them to do this if you're sure that they can do it correctly and they understand the underlying concepts. And then, of course, our goal as teachers is as they go into the later stages of study, that they take more ownership for learning more of their pieces on their own as we give them the tools to do that. So then we get questions all the time about how to lesson plan for group classes. And this is such a huge topic that we are going to do a webinar just on group teaching. So be on the lookout for that.
Yes, and we'll actually be doing a group teaching demonstration during Pedagogy Saturday at MTNA, and we hope it will be in person this year.
So, it's in Minneapolis. Yep.
Yes, Minneapolis. Looking forward to that.
Yep.
So that brings us kind of to the end of our formal presentation, but we did, of course, want to leave time for questions that you have about lesson planning and even any strategies that you want to drop in the chat. So what I'm going to do at this point is just open our Q&A first. And we'll just kind of go through here from the top. From Sarah, she says, I'd love a recommendation for teaching the music alphabet and alphabet boogie when the student's keyboard starts on C instead of A. Ooh, yeah, so that's tricky when they don't have a full keyboard for sure. Alphabet boogie, you basically just need to have them obviously start on an A, so you could mark the lowest A on their piano somehow if they have trouble finding that. Like in the lesson with a fuzzy or some other way for them to find A, and then shorten alphabet boogie. You can do this fairly easily because there are, the teacher accompaniment jumps in later, so you would just have to kind of accommodate for that and apply it to less octaves. Do you have any other suggestions for that, Julie?
No, I think that at home, just finding the bottom A, having the parent help find that, and then maybe a page marking tab or something that can sit on there, A would be the best way. Yeah.
And then keep working on the family, hopefully, to get a keyboard that's full size, because that is something I talk to parents about before, especially starting in Piano Safari, because as you know, if you've taught it, our rote pieces do use a wider range of the piano than most other primer level methods. So we need the whole keyboard sooner.
Right. We had someone ask a question on our Facebook page early before the webinar, so we'd like to address that next. The question is how to help the child relax the wrist. Level 1 starts on the black keys, and her students' wrists are stiff as they're trying not to miss the keys. So they do the lion paw exercises, but she was wondering about any other tips. So children vary in their coordination at the very beginning of study. And so in the intro unit and unit 1, when they're on the black keys so much, we try to be as picky as we can within reason for that student's coordination. So some students can have a beautiful hand position and play non-legato on their fingertips on the black keys relatively easily. Whereas other students, they're just trying to actually connect the finger to playing the right key, or even with finger 2, which are beginning rote pieces, with how curved the finger is varies among the students. So we would rather go with a slightly flatter finger to stay with a relaxed arm, rather than forcing them to have 2 curved fingers and then locking everything up. So the relaxation comes first, and then the small muscles of the fingertips are developed later as they keep working on their hand position. So often this happens in unit 2 of level 1 when they start playing on the white keys, which is actually easier to keep firm fingertips when playing on the white keys. but for various reasons, we went back and forth. Should we start on the white keys or the black keys when we were writing Piano Safari? And we decided to go with the black keys just because it was easier to find the layout of the keys and to focus on the 3 middle fingers that fit the black keys so nicely. But you want them to start with that loose, non-legato technique rather than forcing them to have a perfect hand position before their coordination can handle that with the smaller muscles. So I hope that answers that question.
So our next question is from Caitlin. What are your standards for knowing when a student is ready to move to the next unit? I like that. That's a great question. So as we mentioned earlier, we were just talking about how you can work within the unit in any order, and you kind of work to the point where they do have everything in the unit learned. At that point, Julie and I both like to do something we call mini recitals. And those are just celebrations of the work the student has done within that unit. So we want everything to be at a standard to where they can actually play it, maybe for their friends or their family, or even just more simply for the teacher and the lesson. Play through all of the pieces in that unit. So we do want them to know the pieces thoroughly. With this said, the technique might still be in a developmental stage. It's hard to play these animal techniques perfectly from the beginning. So that's something we're always refining and coming back to. So, let's say they're playing the tall giraffe technique in Unit 2 and it's not 100% perfect. You can still pass on to Unit 3 if they've learned the exercise, as long as you do maybe cycle back and you keep adding new skills the students learned to old ones, so that over time their technique will be refined and improved.
And also in terms of the technique, the way we've designed Piano Safari through the 3 levels, the technique exercises keep coming back over and over in harder and harder guises. So like the lion paw will come back in book 2 as the lion paw fifths. And so it constantly spirals and builds their technique the way we've designed it as well. One other way to know when students are ready for the next unit is to get the piece cards that go with Piano Safari Friends, level 1 or level 2. And these are just little cards, in case you haven't seen them before, that have the name of the piece on them with the picture. And then on our website, we have what we call unit maps that you can download for each unit of the book. So this is the one for my student who's coming this afternoon, who's 7, and he just started, and he is so much fun. In fact, since we have time, I want to tell my favorite story about him. His brother is working on his RCM exam, and so during the summer, I gave his brother an hour lesson instead of 45 minutes, and then gave the little one a half-hour lesson. And then he came in, and he's like, how many minutes did my brother get? And I said, well, we had to go over because I needed to introduce more things. So he had 60 minutes. And he said, well, are you going to go over with me? And I said, no, but maybe next time. So that the next lesson, he wanted to be first to make sure he got his full 45 minutes. And then he said, can I come back tomorrow? He just loves piano so much. So I'm having a lot of fun with him since all my other ones grew up and are now in Piano Safari level 3 or beyond. So I like having a new little one to work on. But anyway, back to the unit maps. So the little cards go on each of the squares where it says they go. And so this emphasizes the unit-based approach, where this is Unit 1. So as I assign a piece, we tape the piece card to the spot where it goes on the unit map, so the student can see which ones they've learned in the unit and which ones they still need to fill up the whole thing. And then this can become their assignment sheet also, because they just practice the ones that have cards. And then there's a little check off for the sight reading cards as well. So once they've covered the whole thing with the cards and have learned all the pieces, then they graduate to the next unit map. And that is a big celebration when they get a new unit map.
The unit maps are available on our website as a free download, and you can find those under resources. So you just choose level 1, and that's where you can find the teacher guide, and you can find like some of the little cards that go with the pieces. You can find the unit maps, that course that Julie just showed you. Okay, so here's a question from Trisha. For a student transitioning from Safari Friends to Piano Safari 1, would you agree that decorating the piano and finding groups of black keys can be skipped? Yes, definitely. So if they know those concepts thoroughly from Piano Safari Friends, you do not have to do that at the beginning of Piano Safari 1. And some of the introduction pages, like with finger numbers and high and low, they will have learned also in Piano Safari Friends. So most of the material does not overlap, but those basic concepts at the beginning do. So definitely use your judgment as a teacher and skip the things in the introduction that they do not need.
With decorating the piano, though, in Piano Safari Friends, it's very step by step. So they're decorating the groups of 2, the groups of 3, and then each unit has one letter it focuses on so that they know the whole keyboard by the end of the book. So one way to make the piano decorating a little bit harder as they enter level 2 is just to hand them a whole handful of piano decorating materials so that they have to put them on randomly and really think about where all the letters go. That's one way to make it a little harder there. Okay, so next we have, how many sight reading cards do you usually do with the students in the lesson? So this varies greatly. Some students can do only one, especially when you're first introducing a unit or a concept. And then some students can do about probably an average of 3, and then other students can do maybe 5. So the students that can get through them faster, you can just do assign some for home practice and then check them quickly at the lesson. Another thing we have them do is, especially at the older stages like level 3, is to work on the sight reading cards at home and take a video of their best playing of that card and then text it to us so that we can just quickly check it by text and say passed without taking time in the lesson. So there's so many different ways to use the sight reading cards. Just depends on the student.
Yeah, and someone just had another question about that. How many do you assign each week? So by the time my students get to level 2 and 3, I feel they are reading well enough to do them at home. So at that point, I usually send 4 home, maybe during the week, 4 to 5 at the very most. And I put that group in front of kind of the title page of the cover page of the sight reading cards so that I see the group that I assign them. When they come back to the lesson with their completed cards, they should be filled out with the analysis questions or with interval marking and check marks for how many repetitions. So I look at all the cards to be sure they filled them out. I'm really a stickler about that because I want them to get into a routine and a system and have accountability for them. But then what I'll do is I'll turn them upside down and kind of fan them out and have them pull out one that they've practiced randomly, and that's my check in the lesson. So I expect them to be able to play that one they practiced well, right? If they do, then sometimes we'll do a new one in the lesson, but other times maybe I'll just give them the next set of 4 or 5 to take home. So that is how I've done it. It's worked really well.
Here's one from Jean about teaching pedal. She said it's different than I've taught it before, and how best to teach it on Zoom. I think what she's talking about is the steps that we have for teaching pedal in book 2. There's some preparation steps. So first you play the exercise with no pedal, and then they play pedal, play the next one, up, down with the foot, play the next one, up, down with the foot, so that there's a delay in the change of the pedal. So this helps them hold the keys down while their foot's going up, down, because sometimes they'll go up, down, oh, we lost the hand. So that coordination of holding the hand down while making the foot go up, down. And then gradually it becomes more with the chord change. So instead of after the chord change, change, more right with it. So those are the steps we break it down into. Now, as far as teaching it on Zoom, it is very difficult because it's difficult to even hear the pedal on Zoom. So I had some success with putting my camera down by my foot, and so then they could watch my foot and hear the changes. But basically, I have to admit, while I was teaching online during the pandemic, I sort of paused teaching pedal. It's kind of a terrible admission, but
you made the video.
I did make a video, so that's true.
It's a helpful video.
Yeah, but one day I decided I just have to get this girl pedaling well, and so I put my computer on the floor next to my foot, and that really helped. She could really see what was going on with my foot.
Yes. Julie, while I'm answering a couple quick questions, can you grab the sight reading cards if you have some around? Someone asked if they can see them.
Sure.
Um, One question was, can we get a recording of the webinar? Yes, we always share our replays, and so we do that in our Facebook group, Teaching Piano Safari, or you can email us at questions@pianosafari.com or info@pianosafari.com. Either way, we will get that and we can send you the link directly. But the Facebook group is the quickest way to find that. And yes, someone asked about addressing using Piano Safari in groups. And yeah, like we said earlier, we will hold a webinar on that. So that maybe will be our next one, because it's such a huge topic that we want to dig into it a little bit more. So here's Julie with the sight reading cards.
So they're all color coded. These are the ones for level 1. So the student has already done this one because we put a sticker saying that we completed it. And they go very systematically through pre-staff and then on the staff using our intervallic approach. So there's a right hand exercise, a left hand exercise, and then a rhythm tapping exercise along the bottom. And then they get harder in level 2 and in level 3. But they're really nice because they're all color coded. I actually have a whole stack that's laminated in a nice box, so I can easily find them in the lesson or use them for review or figure out where a transfer student might test into their sight reading level. And then they come in a bag, and I just keep them in the bag, and the ones that are done go in the back. So we pull one from the front and then put it in the back when it's done.
Okay, so I'm kind of jumping back and forth here. There's so many good questions in the chat and the Q&A, and we're going to try to finish up around 2. But here's a question from Dixie. It says, rarely I have students who learn all but 1 or 2 of the row pieces but need to move forward. Will it create problems if I move them forward and teach the row pieces as they work through the next level? Not in general. I think if you're catching most of the row pieces, then you can follow up with ones that you weren't able to cover later. What would you say, Julie?
Yeah, we've designed Piano Safari to be as flexible as possible, which is one reason we really like the unit-based approach, because you can assign the pieces in a unit in any order you want. So one week a student may need a new reading piece and another week a new rope piece. So you can just mix and match. And then there are students who maybe they learn the rope pieces so fast that you want to introduce one from the next unit. That's totally fine. You should just use the books in the best way that works for your individual student.
Yes.
Here's a question about what do you do when parents can only afford 30-minute lessons? It's so hard to fit everything in. Yes, it is. But we are big proponents of the 45 or 60-minute lesson, just because if you think about other activities children do, none of them are only 30 minutes long. Like ballet class is usually 45 to an hour, maybe multiple times a week. Soccer is multiple times a week for an hour or more. I don't know anything about soccer. I never played sports, but I do ballet class. And so both Catherine and I went through a point in our teaching where we both decided that we would only offer 45 or 60-minute lessons. And I remember when Catherine said she was going to do this, she was trying to slim down her studio, but everyone said yes to going to 45-minute lessons. So she actually ended up with a bigger studio, teaching more time. And I found that too, that when I explained, you know, we just need more time to get through these concepts, then the parents were willing to go with it. But if you're in a situation where you can only teach 30-minute lessons, and I know this happens sometimes in the school setting, then you want to do less quantity and more quality. So you're covering fewer pieces, more in depth, so the student really feels like they've mastered it. So you can skip pieces, skip sight reading cards, whatever you need to do to keep them moving, but really mastering the concepts that you choose and the pieces you choose to teach.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%, because I think just as teachers, we have to kind of, you know, make sure that students master things so that they're able to continue to progress. Because sometimes if we move too quickly, students can get stuck if those concepts aren't mastered, and then they feel like they have to go back. So we want to avoid that situation. And I do think it's better to move more slowly, building really good habits, than move too quickly and have to fix things. Mm-hmm. So in a 30-minute lesson, just keeping that in mind and not stressing out about the speed at which you're actually moving through the book, but more on how the student is actually mastering the concepts.
Well, it's right about 2 o'clock, so we want to, so many good questions.
Yes, you all have great questions. This is wonderful.
And if we didn't answer your question today, you can always email us at info@pianosafari.com and we will answer your question for sure.
How about this last question from Elena? She says, hello, I'm curious if you have suggestions for long-term and short-term lesson planning. Do you recommend planning out 4 to 8 weeks, a semester, a year? And she says she realizes it will vary from student to student. But yeah, that's such a good question. What do you do, Julie? Do you want to start?
Well, I admit I don't do long-term lesson planning, but I've considered starting it this year because sometimes I feel like my students aren't moving fast enough, like we're spending too long. So I think that if I had like, this is what I plan to cover in the first month, this is what I plan to cover in the second month, then I can sort of see how our pacing's going. With my older students, one thing I do at the beginning of the year is choose all the pieces I think they might like to play this year. So I spent a good hour choosing music for my eighth grader yesterday at the level that he's at, level 5, 6, 7, so that I would have a variety of pieces to play for him and choose. And then I can think throughout the year how many pieces he can reasonably get through and which ones I might want to have him work on next. So because I feel confident in teaching Piano Safari after teaching it to so many students, usually I feel like it sort of self-plans, like I just sort of know what needs to come in the next week. But I think a longer range unit plan to, like, maybe we're going to spend 4 weeks on unit 2 and just know that that's my goal is also a good way to do it.
Yeah. I tend to work with a system more than think about concrete long-term goals. For example, when my students finish Piano Safari Level 3, we go into a Czerny Etudes Book 1 that we publish, Czerny for the Progressing Pianist. And so my system for that, for example, is they'll sight read an etude each week, and they'll keep an older etude to build their technique. So I kind of get in these systems that just carry themselves through really naturally. Mm-hmm. So that's more my teaching style. And if they get really bogged down and they aren't following my system, and then I tend to make adjustments. I hope that makes sense. That was a really kind of quick answer to a question that deserves some time and thought. But so I think we're going to end there. Thank you so much for attending today. You were asking great questions, and I hope there's a time we can meet you all in person at conferences. But in the meantime, please email us if we didn't get to your question today. We'd love to hear from you anytime.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody. We'll post the replay soon.
Yes.